Well, hello and welcome, Electus Society members, those who are participating live and those who are watching this recording. This is part 5 of our training, Raising Consciousness, What's Not Taught in the History Books. And so what we're going to be talking about in today's training is a lot of different topics. But before I jump into it, I just want to say that this specific training is dedicated to my grandmother who passed away in 2018. She was a very important person in my life and a very important spiritual teacher, and that we'll talk about it. I'm going to share a little bit of my story. But here's the learning outcomes of this training. We're going to be talking in 3 parts. Part 1 is all about unity consciousness, okay? And in Egypt, what is one of the most important pharaohs in Egypt that talked about unity consciousness, that represented unity consciousness? I'll tell you the answer. It's the Pharaoh Akhenaten. And so we'll talk a little bit about him. I'll show us some video clips. Also, there's a lot of leadership lessons that we can learn from him. And then we're going to have a discussion. What has been some of your greatest fears and how can you overcome them? Because Akhenaten created these Egyptian mysterious or mystery schools, right? And he taught students a lot of different things about raising consciousness. And one of them is how to overcome fear. And I'm going to share with you how he did it. And then that they taught in these schools. Then part 2 is we're going to talk about esoteric and biblical research. Again, I'm going to share my personal story. Like, Tim, what made you go down this rabbit hole of studying different religions, esoteric, mystery schools? Well, it has to go with my upbringing, and again, wherever you are on your spiritual journey or atheist, or whatever religion, just take this as a grain of salt that this is just my research and my perspective. And I would love for you guys to do your own as well. I'm going to share with you at some of the Roman Catholic Church changed some of the different views and attitudes of different teachings and scriptures and things like that I found very interesting as you go down the rabbit hole of biblical research. So I'll just share some key insights. And then finally, we'll end with secret societies. Ooh, are there some group of people that control the world? Well, there has been secret societies, and they were actually pretty much responsible for the establishing of America, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and things like that. But, again, any organization, any religion, is it all good, all bad? Well, it's individual people that can make decisions that are either doing something constructive or they can be doing something very not constructive and can, do very harmful and hurtful things. And so we'll be talking about that. And finally, again, William Shakespeare. One person said the 2 most important books that you could ever read, if you could only read 2, would be the Bible and all the works of William Shakespeare. Well, did William Shakespeare actually write all those plays? Well, this is not something that's typically taught in the history book. So going on with that theme, I'd like to share a piece of documentary that I've watched as I went down this rabbit hole that I think you all enjoy very much as well. So let's jump into a grounding meditation. Let's start off with 2 minutes so we can get grounded and centered for all the great things that we're going to cover. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to turn off my camera and we'll play this 2-minute grounding video.
Hello there, and welcome to this 2-minute meditation for grounding. Begin by sitting in a chair with your feet touching the floor. Relax your hands on your thighs with your palms facing upwards and close your eyes. Begin to breathe slowly in and out, noticing the feeling of how the air expands and contracts your belly and chest. Relax your body from head to toe and begin to imagine yourself in a beautiful, calming forest. Stay here and just admire the view, the trees, the sky, feeling the grass under your feet. Maybe it's autumn here and you feel the fallen leaves under your feet. As you stay here, relaxed and still, visualize how tiny roots begin to grow from the soles of your feet. These roots grow into the earth and make you feel grounded and secure. You now connect with Mother Nature's positive energy, making you feel so protected and loved. See how these roots begin to grow deeper and deeper into the earth, becoming thicker. Observe how you feel now, and when you feel ready, move your toes and fingers. Open your eyes and continue your day filled with centeredness, confidence, and compassion.
All right. What better way to start off a training with that grounding exercise? So let's jump in. Part one, Unity Consciousness in Egypt and the Ancient Mystery Schools. So as we're going to be discussing both the history of the world from, you know, different sources, and some of them non-scientific. One of them is the book, The Ancient Flower Secret of Life. This one right here. There's 2 volumes, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. And again, the video Spirit Science on the YouTube channel did a great job covering some of the topics. And he pulled from all this great material. And so one of the things that's so fascinating when you start studying Egypt is that they had so many different gods, like Anubis and Ra and Horus. And they're like, why was there so many of these different gods? Well, it's only from this non-scientific resource that of Thoth and Drunvalo that kind of explains, well, what did they misinterpret? What did they get wrong? And it has to do with levels of consciousness, and that the first level of consciousness has to do with the amount of chromosomes of different human DNA, and that we actually have different levels of consciousness and different levels of chromosomes. And so that the actual gods represented meters or actual specific chromosomes. Then in the video, it talks about, in ancient Egypt, all these different leaders of Egypt were known as kings. But at some point in time, they changed the name from a king to a pharaoh. Well, who changed that? Well, according to this material, it says that Pharaoh was what Akhenaten called himself, because it means that which you will become. That's in alignment with a lot of the different other non-scientific resources and teachings that we've been learning about. He also was a very, very powerful leader. He talked about challenging the status quo, which we know is a leadership principle. He challenged the entire Amun priesthood that was in power. And we're going to be showing a little bit more clips of videos about that. That he advocated for peace. We don't go to war with people unless we're attacked, kind of like what some people right now are in the United States and all around the world. We have this military industrial complex that profits and benefits from wars and things like that. And finally, he was trying to raise consciousness, and he created these ancient mystery schools. And so, Kieran, I see that you made a comment, wow, that this is very similar to Hindus believe in multiple gods and goddesses. Absolutely. But let's actually share what in this video clip, what Thoth's perspective is, and Drunvalo on what all these different gods represented in Egypt. So let's check this out right now.
Ourselves. Thoth was the one who introduced writing. And if you look at ancient Egyptian culture, it even says Thoth brought writing to us, as well as many other things. Now that we were in the second level, over time, things began to change, and a very serious problem developed, which if it hadn't been solved, it would have caused a major catastrophe in our own near future. Basically, in Egypt, the Ascended Masters had used Osiris's genetic coding of changing chromosomes to show others the path of ascension. They developed a system of 42 and 2 gods, with a lowercase g. They were actually called Neters. Most will recognize this one. His name was Anubis. There were 42 and 2 Neters who were representative of human chromosomes. Each one of them showed a specific pathway of life or human experience, and people would follow these understandings to learn more about their life or their own reality. The problem developed when both Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt became more separated from themselves, and the meanings of these Neters were lost. Over time, the drawings of these Neters changed, and the meanings changed with them. People had no idea what they meant. Then it got worse, when the Egyptian king Menes merged Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt into a unified country. Menes also merged the belief systems, so now you had 88 gods that people were fighting over to decide who was really God. This was an issue because now they had people not knowing what to believe, completely lost, separated from their understanding of their own divinity and God. Things became separated further. People fought over which gods were really gods. Today, we look back and say, wow, they thought there were so many gods, when really, this wasn't the case at all. Even with the help from the Tat Brotherhood, we just couldn't get it right. There was one short period of Egyptian culture that most historians don't really understand. As it's written in ancient texts and hieroglyphs, for 17 and a half years, there was a bizarre new ruler that completely changed how Egypt was run, and his name was Akhenaten. Before him, there were only kings. Akhenaten was the first pharaoh, which meant that which you will become. He was also, believe it or not, 15 to 16 feet tall, at least that's how he was always depicted, and had an elongated skull. Both of these aspects are related to Christ consciousness. Akhenaten abolished all previous understandings of God and tried to instill a one God understanding in everyone. After 17 years, the majority of Egyptians revolted and Akhenaten was killed, soon to be replaced by someone else, returning to the old system. What actually happened? To correct the problem, Thoth got the help from Ai and Tia, who were the first immortals from Lemuria, and got them to mate interdimensionally to conceive a Christ consciousness being. Thoth said that he worked with the previous kings of Egypt to help achieve this, and Egyptologists find that Akhenaten came completely out of nowhere. It took some time, and there was a transitional period involving Amenhotep III, but soon Akhenaten was on the throne. Akhenaten used his time to bring Egypt back to a simple religion where there was one God, one reality. He used imagery of a sun disk to represent this. The priests in Egypt didn't like that because the religious beliefs were centered on the priests. Then he comes along and says, you don't need priests. God is within you, and you can access God from within your own selves. Well, they didn't like that. He also pulled the military back and said, don't attack unless someone else attacks first. The military didn't like him either. Plus, the people generally didn't like him because they enjoyed worshiping their many gods. Eventually, they disposed of him. After all that, what did Akhenaten do that evidently saved humankind? Well, he developed a mystery school with the intention of showing a small group of humans a way to ascend into the immortal state. Usually, it took hundreds of years to reach the level of immortality, and Akhenaten had 17 years to produce results. This was a very close call, but he did it. He actually showed 300 individuals the path to immortality in this short time. So after the general population disposed of Akhenaten, these 300 immortals would go beyond Egypt.
All right. So pretty cool stuff. So now let's keep going and find out what is it that they actually
Ourselves.
hold on, did. So let's go back to full screen. So now let's talk about these mystery schools. What Akhenaten did is he created 3 mystery schools. One is the left eye of Horus. Okay, that's this right here. Which represented the sacred feminine school. And then there was the right eye of Horus right here, which represented the masculine. And then here was the third eye of the Horus school. So what I'm going to do is there is an excellent documentary, and it had a lot of different episodes. It's over 3.5 hours long of all these clips. It's called The Pyramid Code. Now there's a new book called The Pyramid Code by a different author, but it's not to be confused with this. There was this lady by the name of Carmen. She was a professor, studied Egyptology, and she put this whole documentary series together. I highly recommend that you check it out as one of the additional resources that we'll send in the video. But here's what's very important that you understand about these mystery schools. Their goal was to raise the consciousness of these individuals, right? Raise their spirituality. And they talked about the left brain, which is the masculine. So, and then the right brain, which is associated with the feminine. And sometimes it's always confusing for me to say, how do you remember left, right, left brain, right eye school, left, it can get kind of confusing. The best way to kind of remember it, I created this kind of device, is you start off with the brain comes first before the eyes. So think left logical, okay, LL, left logical, and the left brain is associated with the right. So if you talk about the right eye of Horus school, that's going to be the masculine. And if you have the right brain, which is the feminine, related to the left eye, well, that's going to be related to the sacred feminine. So check this video clip out and I hope you find it as interesting as I do about history of founding of these schools and what they did.
The secrets of the ancient Egyptians were not for the commoners.
But for a very, very small group of elites who had to be initiated over many, many years to appreciate what this text said.
They were for the high-level initiates, which were people who were trained, and they would go through different initiations, tests that would help them be wise, that would help them confront their fears, that would balance them in the body, mind, and emotions.
Initiates were students who were given rudimentary instruction on the mystery traditions of Mayan and Egyptian cosmic cycles.
As they approached higher levels of consciousness, they came to respect different aspects of themselves that were represented in the feminine and the masculine. But they went further and called it sacred feminine and sacred masculine, which meant the purest form that was actually connected to the two hemispheres of the brain.
Feminine consciousness corresponds to the right hemisphere of the brain and the left side of the body. In contrast, masculine consciousness corresponds to the left side of the brain and the right side of the body. Patriarchal consciousness focuses on history, linear time, dogma, rationality, waking reality, and science. Matriarchal consciousness focuses on eternity, cycles of time, ritual, magic, altered states, and art. If we
All right. So there we have it. Okay, a great explanation of the mystery schools. So now let's go back to, here we go. What were they trying to teach in these mystery schools? Which is a lot of different things, but one of them was overcoming fear. So now this leads us to our discussion question. Okay, what has been some of your greatest fears and how did you overcome them? Okay, so again, the question, what has been some of your greatest fears and how did you overcome them? And while you're thinking about that, I'll share a quick story about my greatest fears. If you know and seen all the past different videos and recordings about from Atlantis Society and the different trainings, you know I've talked about my history of my life, my history with my relationships with my wife, the different things that I did that I was not very proud of in terms of growing up without really a strong mother figure, seeking out love and attention and affection from other people, other women, and things like that. And my life really changed when I did the Landmark Worldwide Forum course, that 3-day course where I ended up taking all their additional courses and being one of their coaches for their 4-month leadership program. And, you know, what we did in that 3-day conference was very, very powerful. One was we learned about integrity, which is something that we talk about a lot here in Elective Society. But the second thing that comes with integrity is, can you take full responsibility for everything that you've done in your life, everything that you said, everybody that you've harmed or hurt? And there's a lot of different fears that people have that prevents them from taking action. There's the fear of being liked by other people, right? That other people won't like them, or that people will judge them or criticize them, of being completely ostracized and alienated, right? There could be multiple fears. So there'll also be a fear of death, all that other kind of stuff. So for me, one of my greatest fears was lack of love and affection and connection. So even though my wife had said, Tim, if you do anything to hurt me, I'll divorce you, I'll leave you. And that was a really kind of scary thing for me to confront, because I had done these horrible things. I was unfaithful. And it's like, what do I do? And in this course of Landmark Worldwide, they basically say, okay, we're going to do a visualization exercise. And you have to visualize every terrible thing that you've done, or whatever they had me figure out, or, you know, whatever fear it was. And I had to imagine that my entire family found out about this. And so I'm have my eyes closed and I'm imagining now not only my family learning everything of terrible that I've done. I imagine, now expand to your whole entire community. Imagine your job finds out. Imagine the whole world. Imagine like a newscast. So all your fears are being amplified in this visualization experience. And so you're like terrified. You're feeling all these emotions. And then it's important for you to feel all that, because in the end, out of that experience, you have peace and calm, right? Can you actually know what it feels like and have a sense of power to take full responsibility, to not have any fears anymore? And it was very, very intense. And again, it was a very powerful exercise, but I don't think it ended there. I ended up, talking with my wife. I ended up taking responsibility and told her the truth about what I had done. Why? because my intention was to save the relationship. But guess what happened? I was prepared mentally to be able to say, listen, what you do right now can end your relationship with your wife. But if you want a loving relationship, you have to be honest with her, right? You have to be able to confront this, because deep down she knows she doesn't feel safe. And so I did it, and it was very scary. I almost threw up in my mouth, actually, even trying to talk to her and tell her these things. But do you know what happened after that? Like, I couldn't, I like lost all my fear. I felt a sense of power. So to me, there is something very important in this lifetime for each and every one of you, is to really learn to gain control of your emotions and fears and not let them overcome you. So that's how I did with mine, right? And to this day, I still love, trying to overcome my fears. I've gone skydiving. I've gone, I've even started my own business. I've even started my own, Duffy Leadership Incorporated, to do speaking engagements. That was kind of scary. I started Electus Society, my 501c nonprofit, and these are very big, scary things to do them on your own, but every time you do it, you get stronger and stronger. So that's my story. I just thought I'd share with you to kind of get the ball rolling. So who here wants to share on what's been some of your fears and how have you been able to overcome them? Does anybody like to share? Should I call on some people? Henry?
Yeah, Tim, like I said earlier, mine is due dates and deadlines, Tim,
Yeah. So that's your greatest fear, is due dates and deadlines, but there's probably something more behind the due dates and deadlines, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, just not getting it done, time running out before I complete my mission. That's just not in one aspect,
Okay. Well, Henry, can you allow me to go a little deeper with you on this topic?
Sure.
So I know you as an Elected Society member. You've been very supportive. You're one of the founding members. We've talked a while. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm going to go out on a limb, because I think I know you, right? I think we know each other quite well. And what you may be experiencing, I think other members of Elected Society may experience as well. From what I know about you, Henry, you're a very honorable person. You're very hardworking. However, here's what you do. You care so much about people, right? That oftentimes I would describe it as you take the shirt off your back, right? You do anything to really kind of help people, right? Hey, stop everything that you're doing and I need to help them. But there's a tendency there when I hear, hey, I'm so afraid of deadlines and stuff like that, it's because maybe, again, you correct me if I'm wrong, you go above and beyond and overcommit yourself. And it comes from this place, or maybe this fear that maybe I'm not doing enough, maybe I'm not helping enough. And so you say yes, 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 yes. And guess what ends up happening? You've said yes to too many people. You've taken on too much. And what ends up happening is you end up feeling frustrated because you can't complete what you committed to do. Now, Henry, I did a little psychoanalysis. Again, I'm not a psychotherapist, but you tell me if I'm on the right track, or what are your thoughts about what I'm sharing with you?
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, Tim, to be honest. Yeah, we do have a history, and you do know a lot of the things that I've been challenged with throughout my course of my academic and personal life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do have a tendency to take on more than maybe I should at times, and that leads to other things.
Yeah. So here's my invitation for you, right? And this goes for other people. If your fear is missing deadlines, right, and doing that, then there are tools that can help you to do this. The first thing is experience the feeling of what would it be like to actually disappoint others, and really kind of feel that feeling. Imagine the people being so disappointed in you, and know what that feels like, right? Feel those emotions, feel that tingling and sensations. And then I invite you to say, this feeling that I'm experiencing, I don't want this anymore. I want to release it. Okay. I don't want to be governed by this. I don't want to experience this anymore. So you can visualize a purple flame, consuming it, burning it, you could even do something physical, writing this fear down, tearing a piece of paper. But it's very important for you to have a cathartic experience releasing all these fears and emotions, right? Because fears and emotions are just kind of like a vibrations, right? Once you release it and make a conscious decision, it can no longer get a hold of you. And then what ends up happening is, now that you have that epiphany and release that, okay, now I've done this, I've experienced this, how can I go moving forward? Well, here's what you can do. Use some of the tools that we've talked about in Atlantis Society. Instead of making commitments, your task will be to say no a lot more, or to not take on new, because that's stepping outside your comfort zone, right? For you to say no to people when you really want to help them, or want to, save them, or whatever it might be. And the other thing is, do what I do, and I'm constantly working on this on myself. I lie to myself. That sounds terrible, right? No, I pretend that I have deadlines that are much earlier than the actual deadline. So all this week, as I was actually working on my presentation for this thing, I didn't pretend that my session was on Sunday. I had to pretend in my mind that the session happened on Saturday, and then I had to work on it on Friday. And then when it was Sunday, when I'm working on my last minute kind of changes, the presentation, I had to say, the presentation's due at 3:00. Lie to myself. And so I'm working really hard to do this changes to the presentation, and 3:00 happens, and I'm like, ooh, all right, it's not 3:00. I still have some more time. So you've built in these buffers, and that can kind of help you, because you're human. You can get distracted and things like that. Do you think, are those tips helpful for you, Henry?
Yeah, Tim, that was great.
All
And
right.
yeah, I think I kind of do that at times, but just didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great, Tim.
And,
Thanks.
and remember, forgive yourself in the sense that, if you say no to everybody, you can stay home and watch Netflix all you want, and you won't do anything. It takes something to be on the court and actually to say yes to help out people, because like I even had moments of right today before this presentation, I'm like, do I really want to do this training today? No, I'm a human just like you. I'd rather be doing sometimes other things, but then it's constantly overcoming your emotions to not let them control you, where you end up having breakthroughs, right? And the reason I'm sharing all these kind of tips and best practices, because I know what you're going through, because I go through the same thing, and so remember, it's not about being perfect. Okay, you're perfect just the way you are right now. It's about, can I just be a little bit better than I was yesterday? Okay. Those little kind of baby steps. I usually procrastinate half an hour before I need to do a thing. If I can just procrastinate, only 25 minutes versus 30 minutes, well, guess what? You are better, Henry, than you were yesterday. So that's the little ways to overcome your fears. That's the other ways to make those constant improvement. And then you stop beating yourself up. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Tim.
No, I appreciate it. And thanks for being vulnerable. And I'm sharing this experience because, again, I think other people who are watching this recording can actually learn from that experience. So, all right, let's keep going for the sake of time. Let's talk about overcoming fear. So this, I think, is really, really cool that I got out of this book. So the following ceremony that I'm about to share all with you that I got out of this book, it's a perfect example of the importance that Egyptian placed on overcoming fear, on the negative emotions. Fear was and still is the primary force that stops a person from growing into the light. As we move into higher worlds of light, right, where once we die, one perspective is that we go through different dimensions and things like that. What we think and feel, we manifest, which goes back to part 1 training, right? What is consciousness? Our ability of our thoughts and feelings to create reality. And guess what? The fact that nature becomes a tremendous problem, since we almost always manifest our fears first. So in order to survive in the higher worlds, we must first overcome our fears in earth. So to that one perspective, this whole life existence, this is one big simulation for us to overcome our fears, to feel connected with the oneness of everything, to love, to become ambassadors of light. And there's no other better opportunity than in this lifetime right now to confront our fears. So again, I think that's pretty cool. So now I want you to all pretend that you are back in Egypt, okay? You're part of the mystery school. And so your teacher basically tells you, okay, students, what I want you to see is stand in front of this little pit right here that's full of water, okay? And it's only like a couple 3 feet by 3 or 4 feet, you know, like a yard each way. And I want you to hold your breath, okay? And I want you to, for as long as you can, go down into this deep pit and come out the other side and overcome your fears. You ready? You only have 1 breath to do it. Go. Can you imagine what that experience would be like, you know, standing at that pit and jumping in? Well, again, this was an opportunity to work on your fears. So if you could imagine, if you're a person who's very fearful of the dark, of not knowing what's going to happen again, etc., this could be terrifying, right? And the idea of not being able to breathe, again, even more terrifying. So guess what? If you are nervous and very scared and you're like, I just have to do it, and you jump in, guess what? You could end up really hurting yourself, because guess what? As soon as you jump into the well, guess what? It's not a straight down well. It actually has little bumps and indentations, and you can actually hit your head. And so imagine going down the well and then suddenly there's a block towards you. If you don't have calm of mind, calm of spirit, calm of emotions, you can't navigate this. So then you have to go deeper, and you go around that bend, and then you go deeper, and then there's another bend, and then you have to go even deeper. Can you imagine all this while you're holding your breath? And then suddenly you hit the floor, and then down below there's a little opening. All right, so then you go down underneath it. You don't even know where you're going. You know, your tendency is to want to go back where you came from. You don't know how far this tunnel goes. Your fears are really coming up right now. Then guess what happens? You see a crocodile. Not only one crocodile, many crocodiles as you come up underneath it, and they're all swimming above you, okay? Now you're terrified, okay? You have to feel those emotions of the crocodiles. You see a stairwell, and you're like, oh my God, can I actually not get eaten? Can I actually overcome this fear? And this is what these Egyptians did in the mystery schools to overcome your fear. So you deal with it, you're running out of breath, you swim really quickly, and you see the steps, and you get out as fast as you can. Guess what the leaders of the mystery school teach you? They say, I'm sorry to let you know, Tim, you have now failed the test. You're like, what? You know, I was able to hold my breath, go under the water. I was able to swim past the alligators. It's like, no, you still have to go back and do it again until you complete the test correctly. And so you have to do this all over again. This is kind of like life. And so guess what the actual answer to the test is in order to overcome this? Not only do you have to overcome the fear and see the crocodiles, you have to actually even go even deeper to where it's even darker, and then go underneath and just come out to the other side. And then that is the actual test, and you've actually passed the test. And in case you're wondering, how could these like spiritual teachers be so reckless and have crocodiles that could eat you alive? You know, you could die in this mystery school. Well, unbeknownst to them, guess what? The crocodiles were all fed full meals prior to them swimming in the water. So once a crocodile's full, if you don't agitate or anything, it's not going to bother you. So again, this was another opportunity for you to overcome your fears. Is that cool or what? You know, this was in volume 2 of the book, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. But I thought this was so interesting, and I hope that you guys find it as fascinating as I did. You know, and there's an actual temple called Kom Ombo, and Thoth, this ascended master, would teach Drunvalo and Melchizedek where it was, how they did this, and stuff like that, which most people wouldn't even know. But of course, he had that inside knowledge. So now we're talking about mystery schools in ancient Egypt. Now let's talk about the afterlife and the corruption and how this relates to leadership. So remember how I said Akhenaten, one of the most important pharaohs and leaders practicing this unity consciousness, challenging the church? Well, guess what he did? In that period of time, they were called the Amun priest, okay? And what they did is they would actually sell little dolls and says, if you buy these dolls, guess what? This will help you in the afterlife. You remember if you studied ancient Egypt or watched that Disney Plus show called, I think it was called Moon Knight, where they show that you, at the end of your life, you compare your heart and you weigh it against the feather, and the feather is supposed to lighten up the load. If you lived a good life, it's perfectly balanced with that feather, meaning you don't bring a lot of issues of karma and drama into you once you've died. Well, guess what? In this video, they talk about the priest would sell all these dolls, and Horus would then hold onto the scale and make sure that you went into the afterlife. So anybody who studied history knows this sounds exactly what the leaders in the Catholic Church did in the 1500s, where in order to sell salvation, they would sell something called indulgences, right? Which led to the Protestant Reformation. Remember where Martin Luther, he put the 95 Thesis on the church, saying, hey, the church, you got to stop doing what you're doing. You know, you're going away from the different teachings of the Bible. And again, I'm just so amazed how the cycle keeps going over and over again. And then it kind of ends where Akhenaten had Nefertiti, his wife, they had children, King Tut, and how, again, Akhenaten tried to teach people to say, stop worshiping up all these gods. Believe in the sun, called the Aten, you know, because they couldn't make idols out of the sun. And just this is similar to what Moses did and other different things. So as you can see, the cycles of history in terms of religions in the past, they all keep coming back, in which I'm very fascinated. And then they changed his name to Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun. And so I thought that was very fascinating. So watch this very, very, this short clip. Check it out.
The most important ceremony for teaching the populace how to live well was the weighing of the heart. It reveals what the ancients believed happened in the moments after death.
Initially, in the ceremony of the weighing of the hearts, the deceased would meet Anubis, who would say, you're dead. Let's have your heart. We're going to weigh it against the feather of truth. If your heart was heavy because you had done something immoral, you weren't allowed to go to the other side. So the populace learned that they had to be light of heart in order to live well.
As ancient Egypt slipped into patriarchal ways of being and thinking, the old spiritual ideology became codified, and organized religion became dominated by the Amun priesthood.
The Amun priesthood had a lot of power, and they were in a position to have people pay for their salvation. It used to be that your heart was weighed against a feather of truth. But in later pictures of the ceremony of the weighing of the heart, you'll see Horus holding onto the scale, and you could pay the priesthood for Shakti dolls. And the more of them you had, the more likelihood you could buy the lightness of heart instead of being light of heart. Well, this is a fundamental change in terms of how to live well. And I think that we still are living in that way.
History is written by its victors, and as the patriarchy took hold, much effort was put into suppressing Egypt's matriarchal past.
There's a few pharaohs who were erased from the king's list. Hatshepsut was one, Akhenaten was one, and Tutankhamun was another.
The legacy of the controversial pharaoh, Akhenaten, was almost lost forever with the complete destruction of the city he and Nefertiti had founded at Amarna.
Now, very little was known about Amarna until there was an earthquake, and the pylons at Karnak were filled with these little blocks that had been cut up, and they used them from Amarna to just put as filler inside the pylons. So when archaeologists found them and started putting them back together, they realized there was a very large story here.
For the ancients.
All right. Well, we could keep watching more of the video clip, but I think that's as much as I want to show right now, just because I want us to get to the other content in the training. Give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right. So now let's go into the next part of this training, which has to do with esoteric and biblical research. So, right. So we've just talked about Akhenaten, the mystery schools and stuff like that. And as we saw in the spirit science video, not only did Akhenaten create these mystery schools, he is said to have created the mystery schools, which led to the creation of the Essenes, right? Another mystery sect in Egypt in 500 BC. And so eventually we're going to be talking about secret societies and, that have continued all the way from the past. But now I want to kind of interrupt, this programming to talk about a little bit about me and my story and how did I come to like discover and do all this research about the mystery schools and Akhenaten and the spirituality? Well, I think it kind of gives you a kind of overview of where I'm coming from and how I led to this idea and concept of studying unity consciousness. So for those of you who don't know, some of you may have seen this before who have attended this training in the past, who are level 3 members. Some of this is a lot new to most of you. I was raised in a lot of different religions, a lot of different Christian religions. So when I grew up, I attended a church called the Rosicrucian Fellowship, okay? The International Association of Christian Mystics, TRF. And it was founded in 1909 by this guy named Max Heindel, right? And it was all about Christianity mixed with astrology, that we were entering the Aquarian age. These were people who believed in reincarnation. They were vegetarian. And it was also a lot about esoteric Christian mysteries, right? And I'm like, what the heck is esoteric? I don't even know what that means. I'm going to church and doing all this other stuff. And what I found out was esoteric stands for something that's very unusual, not well understood or liked only by a small number of people, right? Especially those with specific knowledge. So do you see how this kind of has a theme that goes throughout the history of there's these secret schools, these esoteric, these mystery schools that are teaching people these very, very important stuff. So again, I wouldn't have had any interest in this, but again, when you were born and raised this, it makes you a little curious, like, hey, what do these people believe in, or what am I supposed to believe in? And then, again, because I grew up in Oceanside, California, and these palm trees, you can tell, was the compound in Oceanside, California, and this was the temple. Well, there wasn't really a lot of good schools in California. So my parents decided to take me to a Roman Catholic school, all right, St. Patrick's. This was an actual image of the school. And I would go to the church on Sunday, and go through all this kind of thing. So it's like, I went from Rosicrucian Christianity mixed with astrology, and now I'm Roman Catholic, and I'm going to the churches and services and praying and listening to the nuns who are my teachers talk about God. And then guess what happened? My parents, my mother specifically, decided to become Seventh-day Adventist. Again, another religion, right, where they go to church on Saturday, which is considered the Sabbath. They're again vegetarian. Ellen White is the considered their leader of her church, talking about eating a good diet. And you were baptized. Eventually, I was baptized as a Seventh-day Adventist. But again, one of the critiques that I will give of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and again, this is with anything, you could actually take any organization and it's full of people. So your experience is all going to be based on the people you meet, right? So is it the church that is the problem, or is it a good church? Is it a bad church? Or is it just people who make decisions and that is what it is? And so for me, I was raised in the church. I had some conflicts because I didn't really resonate with the attitudes towards gay and lesbian, because I felt I was very critical of that when I was raised in the church. I was very focused on the devil, the 666 that was going to come, and again, they were kind of very focused on that. So, but I did like that they were all vegetarians, because whenever I went to church on Sunday, I'd get a nice big potluck dinner of good food that I could eat. And then my parents divorced, and my dad became a Mormon, also known as Latter-day Saints, or LDS. Now, currently, the church likes to be identified in their full name. They don't want to be identified as Mormons, that they are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So when my parents divorced and I lived in California, I would travel and visit my father during the summer. And when I'm living with my father, he's going to take me to church on Sunday. So now I'm going to church, with the Mormons, with the Latter-day Saints, and they're telling me, okay, believe in Joseph Smith. And as you can tell, this was very troublesome for a young, teenager to be going up through all these religions, because I kept having my mom and my dad try to decide, hey, why didn't you come with me? Join my church. This is the true church. So I really had a dilemma, like, which is the true church? The Seventh-day Adventists are saying, no, we're the true church. The Latter-day Saints are saying, we're the true church. This was really frustrating for me. And like, I'm trying to have to compete over my love and attention between my mother and father. But eventually, what happened in California, it was a bad situation for me over there. And so my grandmother, God bless her soul, and my grandfather said, why don't you come live with us? We'll take you in. And that's what I did. I moved to New York. I lived with my grandparents, and my grandmother became what is I call my first spiritual teacher, right? And whenever somebody would ask her, what is your religion? She would say, my religion is like what the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. And so once I started to learn about my grandmother, she had an amazing history, and it was very fascinating. And so I'm going to share with you briefly what her history was. She was a Protestant, I believe it was a Methodist. That's what she was raised as. Her father was a minister, traveled around speaking. Again, she knew she could quote the Bible and all the other stuff. But where she grew up in Wisconsin, she had a Jewish friend named Shirley and a Catholic friend named Kathleen. And so they would have little dinner dates and hangouts like you do as little kids, and they would set up a tent in the backyard and sleep. But unfortunately, one day, Shirley and Kathleen got into a big fight, and my grandmother was in the middle of this tent, and Kathleen accused Shirley of said the Jews killed Jesus, and then the Shirley responded, no, the Romans did. And so they started pulling each other's hair, fighting. They broke down the whole tent. And guess what? Kathleen wasn't allowed to come back to their house anymore. And so that was a little seed that my grandmother said, oh my goodness, these religions, they'll kill each other over these different, fights over disagreements and philosophies and beliefs. And so she continued to be friends with Shirley. They were like best buds, her Jewish friend. And they lived about very far away from them, about an hour or so away. And so she decided one, I guess, spring weekend to hang out and stay over the night or several nights over at Shirley's house. So she brought a suitcase over. But apparently during that time was a very important religious Jewish holiday. And the local rabbi of the synagogue found out that this, non-Jewish person, Ruth, my grandmother, was staying, this Gentile was staying in their house, and that he basically told them they're not supposed to be there on this religious holiday. You have to get rid of her. And so the rabbi called the mother of Shirley. The mother of Shirley had to inform Shirley that says Ruth has to leave. She can't stay with us. And my grandmother remembers sitting outside of the house because she wasn't allowed to go in anymore. And my grandparents, my grandmother's parents were called in to come pick her up. And she remembers standing outside waiting while Shirley was crying and says, why can't my friend just be here with me? And so this was the seeds that started my grandmother's journey of really wanting to study religions and why do they treat each other the way that they do. And so she came, an unofficial biblical scholar where she would read different texts, anything about spirituality, different religions. She read all about this book called The Constantine and Sword, where it was all about the way that the Roman Catholic Church treated the Jews, and have, because guess what? Jesus was a Jew, and if you go back even further, Abraham was the father of Ishmael and Isaac. So the Arabs and the Jews come directly from Abraham. So we're all connected through that lineage, if you're a Christian or you're an Arab Muslim. So again, there's more stuff that we have in common than separating us. And so she would tell me that there's all these other different books that didn't get made into the Bible called the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, how she may have been the wife of Jesus. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really cool stuff and very interesting. But I was living my life, I wasn't really like doing a deep dive, but I really resonated with her messages. But I still had my dilemma of, hey, I that's great and all, but I need to choose whether I'm going to hell or not. And I need to know whether I need to be a Seventh-day Adventist or the Church of Latter-day Saints. And my epiphany came when I read this book called Bless Me Ultima. And there was a little boy who was just like me, probably a little younger, who was struggling to decide whether he was going to follow the church of his mother or follow the church or the beliefs of the father. And he had one big nightmare, and he's like, which one I'm going to choose, because I'm going to go to hell if I don't do that. And Ultima, which was his grandmother at the time, told him, well, guess what? Don't you know that whatever water comes into the ocean, whatever comes as rain is the water that goes into the rivers, and it all flows to the sea, meaning all the waters are one. And so instead of actually trying to say this religion, that religion, can't you just believe in the oneness of everything, right? And that you can love all religions. And once I read that, and the little boy basically could finally sleep at night and not having these nightmares, that was my awakening. It's like, oh, Tim, you don't have to actually choose to go be Seventh-day Adventist or the Latter-day Saints. You could just love all religions and love all people. And so this is what unity consciousness was all about, right? And so my grandmother was the Bless Me Ultima. She was that woman that was trying to teach me that way. And all of you who know my journey and my spiritual journey, where I went through a depression at the National Society of Leadership and Success, I met a shamanic empathic healer by Gary Spalansky, who then taught me how to release my emotions. He taught me Reiki. I became a Reiki master. He says, let me expose you to all these different books and different perspectives about spirituality, from Drunvalo Melchizedek's Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 and 2, all about Thoth, the Ascended Master. And then I read Unveiled Mysteries, all about Ascended Master Saint Germain. And I'm continuing to read all my research. And so this is my journey. And so suddenly I'm reading the I Am Discourses, right? This is the third book in the series, which I've quoted from the non-scientific sources about the history of the world. And some of the very interesting things came up. Now, again, this is just one perspective. If this doesn't resonate with you, that's fine, but it resonated with me. So I'm just sharing with you my story. So according to this book, Jesus spoke to students, and here's what he said. He said, when I said, I'm the open door, which no man can shut, I was referring to the great I am, something that we've been learning throughout this series, your I am presence, this kind of power or essence, this spirit within inside all of us, right? And he says, each one of my beloved children of the one Father has the same mighty presence within you, the great I am that I have. Okay, so again, this is going along with some of the different teachings, okay, that I'm starting to learn about. He goes on. He says, the experience that I had 2,000 years ago was to set an example of which every individualization of God, meaning all of us as children of that God, would sooner or later follow. He said, I urge you, beloved children of God, to look upon me as your elder brother, one with you. This was the first time that I read a text that says, view Jesus just like an elder brother. And I'm like, whoa, that kind of shocked me. That kind of surprised me. And it kind of made sense, because if you are this evolved spiritual being, do you want somebody to worship you, or do you want somebody to become empowered? And so I resonated with that message. And it says, the same I am presence that I have, you have as well, which is we're all together, which is one. And so just when you think you're like, oh my goodness, Tim, you're reading all this stuff, is this against the Christian religions and beliefs and attitudes, because this is different teachings of Jesus? Well, guess what Jesus said in this text? It says, I wish to tell you all this truth. And I found this kind of like the disclaimer. Every individual who will send his conscious thought to me with desire to be raised above the limitations of earth, of his or her own creation, and will live accordingly, will receive every assistance from me that is possible to be given, according to the steps of growth in consciousness, which he or she attains from time to time. Boom, mind blown. So what he's saying is, this doesn't invalidate anybody who wants to believe in Jesus, right? Because he's like saying, hey, view me as your elder brother, but if you live a good life, if you need help, you want to call upon me, I love you, brother. I'm there for you. And I'm like, wow, that's a very interesting thing. So it doesn't have to totally invalidate all these kind of, religious perspectives, And then he goes on to say, this is where piqued my interest. It's unfortunate that the orthodox idea was drawn over the minds of people, preventing the comprehension that each one had within her or himself the I am presence, the same that I had, by which they could attain and do the same things I did and win the eternal victory. It's unfortunate indeed that some of the scriptural statements have been clouded by human concepts. Yet I'm thankful indeed that many have remain unaltered. So do you understand that that little phrase in my mind, as you know, I'm like, let me hear all perspectives, but do the research. This was my call to action. Tim, can you read the Bible now? Can you really find out what did Jesus say? What was clouded by human concepts? If you believe this to be true. And so that began my mission, man. I wanted to learn, and so now it's an interesting thing for me. And so it says also in this text, during the years in which the scriptures seem to have been unaware of my activity, because in the Bible it says you didn't know what Jesus was doing for like 17 or 18 years of a life. He's like a little kid, who gets lost, and suddenly he's an older young man who's now teaching the gospel, right? So he says here, I spent time in Arabia, Persia, Tibet, and closed my pilgrimage in India, where I met the beloved master who had then made the ascension through the power of his revelations after revelations came to me, through which I was given expressions or statements that enabled me to hold steady the outer activity of my mind. Meaning, homeboy was actually getting affirmations, which is what we all learn in this whole field of leadership and success, is that what you think and feel, you become. And so I can even imagine Jesus, who says, I am the resurrection of life. He was saying these and learned these phrases from these people and was practicing it. He was doing the meditation. He was doing the work. He was believing in this stuff. So again, as you go down the rabbit hole even further, there is now evidence of different Hindu scriptures, texts, and things like that, Yoganandas that have talk about Jesus, this very wise person coming into their land. And again, I haven't done a deep dive into it. I've just heard anecdotal stories of people referencing it. But as I learn more and more, I'm happy to share with all of you. And then I'll just end with this in terms of raising consciousness. What did he say in this text? He says this. Here's Jesus's advice from this text. Don't allow habits of judging, condemning, and criticizing. You can't be free if you do that. The true activity of the student is only to perfect your own world, right? So stop complaining about all these other things. You need to work on yourself and your immediate family, what you're doing, right? As long he or she cannot do it, as long as he sees imperfection in the world of other God's children, right? So if you're saying that's the problem, this is the problem, like, if you believe in the oneness, you're not really believing in this stuff, right? And this was something that I found very interesting. He said, I did not say on the cross, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? But I did say, Father, how hast thou glorified me? So again, I do my own research. I started reading the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If you start reading the books, you start to realize that the books have different of the similar stories, but have different interpretations and say different things. One book says, Jesus is talking to the man on the cross on his left and right side, and he's saying, oh my goodness, we're going to go to hell. And he's like, no, we're going to go to paradise, and he's like, wow, how could this guy say he's forgiving all these Roman soldiers and he's going to go to heaven? And, this person must be really like a son of God or something important. And then in another text, he's like, God, why have you done this to me? So it's like, what is Jesus really ready to leave, earth and connect with God? Or is he just basically, having a crisis of confidence? He's like, God, why did you do this to me? Again, it's all these different mixed messages. So to me, from this one perspective, I can see how it says, maybe he didn't say, why hast thou forsaken me? Maybe he said, why hast thou glorified me? So again, this is just my research, one perspective. I found it interesting. For those of you who are fascinated by this, I hope you find it as interesting as I have. And then, it just ends with saying, go forth dauntlessly in your quest for happiness and perfecting yourself in the world. So again, I just thought it was some very, very beautiful decks. So as you can tell, I continued my biblical research. There's a great video all about the academic viewpoint of the studying of the Bible. I didn't have time to show you that clip, but here's what I will show you. These are all the different gospels that didn't get made into the Bible, right? And a lot of these talk about reincarnation, talk about a lot of different things. The most important one was the Gospel of Thomas. And that in the time of when Jesus was around, there was not just one Christian church. There was a lot of these different schools, different communities that believed in different things. The Thomasine community believed the resurrection was a symbolic act of spiritual alignment. No, there was the Ebonite community, the Arian community. Again, this is fascinating. I didn't know about this stuff. And then according to the Gospel of Thomas, which I actually read myself, guess what we find out? We're starting to pick up different themes. The kingdom of God is within you and outside of you. So do you see how I'm starting to pick up the pieces of the preponderance of evidence as I start reading all these different sacred texts from non-scientific sources and stuff, that there's a pattern, a way of being. There's leadership lessons. Again, one of them is do not lie. Don't do something you hate. Just don't do it. And guess what? Even at that time, Jesus believed in feminism. He basically, he was talking to Peter, he's like, Mary should leave because she's not worthy of us. And then Jesus says, look at her. She is equal to you men. So again, very interesting that didn't make it in the text. How much would the history of the Roman Catholic Church have been and women views and attitudes in the church if this was part of scripture? Again, I'm fascinated by this stuff. Hope that you guys are as well. So again, now going into the church, the Council of Nicaea basically made this declaration and says, okay, this is the teachings of Christ. We call it the Nicene Creed. I believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God. So do you see how that suddenly invalidates that he is the only Son of God as opposed to we're all children of God? Very interesting. Now you have to believe only in the one holy Roman Catholic Church. That's it. If you don't believe that, you're a heretic, so that really invalidated all these other different religions. And then there was the Council of Laodicea, which was the establishment of these are all the books that are going in the Bible. Here's all the New Testaments and everything else. This is not canon. We're getting rid of it. And then suddenly Jews who were, Jesus was a Jew, suddenly says, guess what? Jews are heretics. You can't hang out with them anymore. You can't give them gifts. Don't talk to them. Don't be with them. And I'm reading this. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then it says, hey, everybody, we've been going to worship on the Sabbath on Saturday. Nope. Now it's Sunday. Okay, no more on Saturday. And then we're going to condemn people who used astrology and things like that. Nope, evil astrology. When, of course, when you read the I Am discourses, different moons and planets were conscious entities and beings, and they had metaphors to learn different lessons. Not in the sense of, oh, let me look at my horoscope. It was actually to connect with that being, that entity. So as you go down that rabbit hole and learn about this stuff. And then so now that leads us to part 3, consciousness and secret societies. So what I'm going to share with you right now is these secret societies. So we started off with mystery schools. We started learning about what they taught in these mystery schools, overcoming your fears. And now, as we fast forward into like the 1500s, 1600s, anything that was outside the church gets what it was called, the occult, right? You're heretics. And so you're not part of the church. Anything that you go against us is bad or evil. Well, guess what? A lot of these people had to create mystery schools or secret societies to protect this esoteric knowledge. So this was a documentary series called The 6 Secret Mysteries of America's Beginnings. And it's like a very, very big volume, but you can watch this whole complete set on this YouTube video I'll share with you. And so what it was about is it's all about the founding of America and what they taught in these mystery schools. So, the person who's helped lead these mystery schools, who was a Rosicrucian and also a Freemason, was Sir Francis Bacon. And any of you who read your science books knows, guess who created the scientific method, right? That we learn on in school, have a thesis, test the hypothesis, check the results, things like that. Guess who invented that? Sir Francis Bacon. He's considered the father of modern science. But yet most of us learn that, but we don't know how he was very, very responsible with teaching a new way of being, of trying to pass this torch of unity consciousness. So check out this 5-minute clip, and then we'll watch another clip. So check it out.
Anybody close to him.
Manly P. Hall was one of the leading people within this whole other world that we talk about.
Hall authored over 200 books and is said to have given some 8,000 lectures on ancient philosophy. He is perhaps most remembered for his contribution to the mysterious Brotherhood of Masonry. Upon his death in 1990, the Scottish Rite Journal, a Masonic publication, noted that he was often called, quote, Masonry's greatest philosopher. Among his teachings was that contained in Masonry and all the secret orders was the ancient wisdom of lost Atlantis. Paul wrote that for more than 3,000 years, secret societies had been laboring to create a background of knowledge necessary to the establishment of an enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. According to Hall, these societies could be traced back to ancient Egypt and had for centuries known of a secret place hidden from the eyes of common men, a place that would one day be revealed. In the 17th century, as settlers were colonizing the New World, Sir Francis Bacon, the leader of secret societies in England, set down his classic work, The New Atlantis. While archaeologists and treasure hunters have searched the globe looking for the lost continent, 400 years ago, Bacon, like many of his contemporaries, believed that Atlantis was America itself.
Well, Bacon, to me, was really fundamental in the American colonizational scheme and its connection to the New Atlantis concept. He was trying to lay a foundation for what could be accomplished in the New World.
While the Atlantis of Plato was a mighty empire known for the philosophy of its kings, Bacon would write of a nation governed by scientific achievement, filled with marvels and wonders never before seen.
Bacon was talking about this new nation, talking about submarines, talking about unimaginable weapons of war, talking about flying machines and tall buildings. How did he come into possession of this knowledge?
Did Francis Bacon outline the course of the New World before its time? And if so, by what power was he inspired to do so? While there are no states or cities that bear his name, his mysterious influence has compelled some to call him the real and true founder of America.
His founding of America was really through other people who were following his work, following the program he'd laid out.
Bacon was the head of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism.
He had a huge influence through being the chief of the Rosicrucian fraternity at the time. He had a huge influence on the birth of modern Freemasonry. And many of those Rosicrucians actually went into Freemasonry at that time to lift it up to its new level. And Freemasonry has a major influence on the founding of America.
While many of the early settlers came to work the land for the cause of religious freedom, there were with them secret societies who came to the New World with another agenda.
Secret societies came to America shortly after the Pilgrims arrived, and they were sent by a man named Sir Francis Bacon.
You get this very strange mixture of people, many of whom understood even then the advantage, spiritually and otherwise, to having secret orders.
Unless you understand the influence of the occult societies on the development of America, on the establishment of America, on the course of America, why you get completely lost studying our history.
And they were the ones through which this work was being put into operation in England, in Europe, and eventually in America and the world.
So that America then could be used to lead the world into the philosophic empire. You understand that America was founded by Christians as a Christian nation. However, there were always those people on the other side who wanted to use America, use our military power and our financial power to establish enlightened democracies throughout the world and restore lost Atlantis.
Yeah, maybe Bacon had it right. Maybe Atlantis is not something yet to occur, but maybe it's occurring right now in America.
In his lifetime, Sir Francis Bacon referred to himself as the herald of a new age. He promoted a new universal order for the whole world. Can this be what early American founders referred to with the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new order of the ages? And does this vision affect America today?
All right. Interesting stuff. So let's go back to another video clip that I want to share with all of you. Is now that you know the history of Sir Francis Bacon and the founding of America, how does this relate to Shakespeare, right? And I think, to me, this is the most important, interesting thing that I don't believe is really taught in the history books is, did Shakespeare actually exist? And I know that this actually may be seen far-fetched, but this documentary does such a good job at really explaining what the facts are. So I'll let you decide for yourselves what you guys think. So let's check out this final video clip and then we'll wrap up the end of this training. It's going to be 22 minutes, but I'm actually going to do it at 1.25 speed just so that we can make sure that we have enough time to have either a Q&A at the end. Okay, let's watch this right now.
Identify what was done. And he's acclaimed by the lawyers as being the great one who inspired them and led them and wrote for them, you know. But the Knights of the Helmets was the name of one of the masks at a key moment when the whole Shakespeare authorship, the name that Shakespeare was being used for the first time.
The Knights of the Helmet took as their inspiration the Greek goddess Pallas Athena, who carried a spear and who wore a great helmet, a symbol of secrecy.
According to tradition, one that wears the helmet of Athena becomes invisible. And they had to swear allegiance to it. Not only that, Athena, the goddess Athena, carried a spear that she shook in the eyes of ignorance. And she was one of the greatest goddesses among the Greeks, ruling through intellect and man's wisdom.
Even as Dr. John Dee had been inspired by angelic beings, some researchers believe that a spiritual encounter with Pallas Athena gave Bacon the inspiration for his life's work.
Well, in some of those cipher writings that he had written, he writes there how this, he heard an heavenly voice.
The voice he heard inspired him toward secrecy and to imitate the work of God.
The divine majesty takes delight to hide his work, according to the innocent play of children. Surely for thee to follow the example of the Most High God cannot be censored. Therefore, put away popular applause, and after the manner of Solomon, the king, compose a history of thy time, and fold it into enigmatical writings and cunning mixtures of the theatre.
That was his mission in life. And for the rest of Bacon's life, he was dedicated to that one purpose.
Baconian scholars believe that Bacon's revelation led him to develop a series of theatrical works that would teach the English people and transform them into a nation that could one day dominate the world and resurrect the Atlantean dream. Believing that he put away popular applause as his heavenly voice had commanded, he is said to have written behind the identity of William Shakespeare.
Shakespeare is a synonym for Apollo and Pallas Athena. They're both known as shakers of the spear in classical tradition. And the spear represents a ray of light, a ray of wisdom. And they shake that spear at the dragon of ignorance. Exactly what Ben Jonson says in his preface to the Shakespeare Folio, to shake a lance at the dragon of ignorance. And this is the role of an Apollo or Pallas Athena. And they have always been the muses of the other 9 muses, who themselves are the muses of all the writers, poets, artists, and so on in history. So Apollo and Athena are the great inspirers. They're the great Shakespeares.
Bacon incorporated these Greek gods within a key symbol, the AA headpiece representing Apollo and Athena. Usually one of the A's is shaded, denoting a light and dark side. This symbol is found printed at the head of certain pages within the Shakespeare Folio and among the acknowledged works of Francis Bacon. Of the two polarities, Apollo and Athena, it was Athena that seemed to dominate Bacon's imagination.
Pallas Athena was, she shook her spear at the eyes of ignorance. So she was the spear shaker. Now, she's always been known as the spear shaker. That was long before the time of Bacon. Back to the Greeks, the spear shaker. So he took that name, spear shaker, and just turned it around to make it Shakespeare. And it used to be written with a hyphen, and then it became one word, Shakespeare, as the name of the playwright for those Shakespearean plays.
But what of the real William Shakespeare, the Stratford man whose name has been revered for nearly 500 years? His writings have been attributed to a number of other authors, including the playwright Christopher Marlowe, Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, and even Queen Elizabeth herself. But Sir Francis Bacon seems to lead the pack of would-be bards, with well over 200 books, essays, and pamphlets on the subject, many of which insist he is the real and true Shakespeare. Meanwhile, Baconian scholars argue that the Stratford man simply lacked the experience and education to have written the works that bear his name.
There is a mystery, because when you look at the plays, everything that's in them and what lies behind them in terms of experience, knowledge, and so on like that's expressed through the plays, and philosophy in the plays, and so on like that, they do not match up with what we know of the life of the actor. In fact, the life of the actor is quite well known. There's quite a lot of research been done on William Shakespeare Stratford. So a lot is known about his life, and none of it matches up what you can deduce from the author from the plays themselves. In fact, the more we find out about the life of the actor, the worse it gets.
Here you have a guy who is barely literate enough to make a mark much less write his name. His mark was only existent in 5 documents. There's not a single letter either from him or to him by any of his contemporaries. How can this guy have written the greatest literary works in the history of the world? It just didn't happen.
Whoever's the author certainly knew about certain things happening abroad in the royal courts, in France, in Italy, and in Spain.
Not only taught the workings of the court, but the intrigues as well. And who would know that? Certainly not a play actor like the William Shakespeare. There's no way that man could have known the intrigues that went on inside the court. But Francis Bacon did. He was well familiar with it. He was brought up in the court.
You can't just say, oh, genius did it all. It's impossible for genius alone to do that. You've got to have all that background, experience, knowledge, and so on, to get something like the Shakespeare plays.
There's even a quote from one of the justices, one of the English justices, that it's clear that from the Shakespeare writings that the author had to be an attorney because there is not a single legal error contained in any of them.
The author writes naturally as if he's a lawyer. You know, he doesn't just put in legal terms here and there just to suit the story. It just, legal terms and the whole legal jargon just rolls off him absolutely naturally as if he's used to living in that environment all the time. Well, that doesn't fit the actor from Stratford.
There's just no way the historic William Shakespeare could have written these plays.
There's only one person who could possibly be the author of those plays, which is Francis Bacon.
Yet wouldn't the colossal size of all the plays, poems, and sonnets be too much for Bacon himself to complete, especially while becoming a lawyer, launching modern science, and writing the many other works attributed to him? This could be where the Knights of the Helmet took part, as evidence suggests that the plays may have been the collective effort of Bacon's literary society.
We know from historical records that Bacon actually had a literary group around him. Some of them were actually paid, employed by him, and others just did it voluntarily. A big group. Why? Why did he do that? You don't employ a lot of people, or writers, poets, artists, and as well as cipher experts and so on. You don't employ them for nothing. So what do they do? And then you get the answer, the Shakespeare plays, because scholars have found out there's been other contributions in the plays from other poets and so on, who all put a little bit in here and there. And then you find that they were either associated with or employed by Bacon. In that group, they're all part of this one group. So then the picture emerges of a typical Renaissance studio. But instead of being an artist, a painter with his studio of pupils, you've got a writer with his studio of pupils working with him. They each contribute a little bit to the picture or the story, but the main artist or author is Francis Bacon himself.
But in the town of Stratford-upon-Avon, people come from all over the world to view the birthplace of the man considered to be the greatest literary mind of all time. In Stratford, they hold a strong view against the suggestion that Shakespeare was anyone but himself.
It's a conspiracy theory, and it's all aimed at toppling the greatest writer who's ever lived.
There is a Shakespearean trust in England, and these are people who are dedicated to the cause of supporting and maintaining that William Shakespeare, the actor, was the actual playwright. I think it's highly unlikely.
Dr. Paul Edmondson is the head of education at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in Stratford-upon-Avon. In this debate, he is known as a Stratfordian, not just because of where he lives, but because of his traditional view of Shakespeare. The Stratfordians are considered the academic adversaries of Baconians. We asked Dr. Edmondson to comment on the Bacon-Shakespeare theory.
It first occurred in 1785. A vicar just outside Stratford got to the age of 80, and then there's some report of him burning the papers that he'd been working on, as if in his later years he just kind of renounced any theory that he had about Bacon. It was taken up in 1856 by, what a surprise, Delia Bacon, no descendant, but she wanted to prove that Bacon wrote the plays. She even went as far as having herself locked in Holy Trinity Church to dig up the grave of Shakespeare, convinced that some manuscripts would have been inside the grave saying, "I did not write the plays, it was Bacon instead." And she didn't get as far as digging up the corpse of Shakespeare. And later she went mad after the publication of her book. But her book was groundbreaking. She had good support from Nathaniel Hawthorne, Mark Twain. She knew literary figures in the States.
Mark Twain was certainly convinced that the historic William Shakespeare did not write the Shakespeare plays. And this is a guy, how can you deny his conclusions? He had the money to investigate it. He had the time to investigate it. He's not known as a crackpot in any other venue.
In 1909, Twain took up the Bacon-Shakespeare controversy with his own book titled Is Shakespeare Dead?, in which he questions the reputation of the Stratford actor in his lifetime.
he's saying that in Shakespeare's own life, no one regarded him as being important or famous or a brilliant playwright or anything like that. It was only 2 or 3 generations after his death that suddenly the historic William Shakespeare became a big deal. So however, the plays enjoyed immediate success and immediate prominence. So how do you explain that?
That's simply not true. There's all sorts of evidence that he died and that he was remembered after his death. First of all, there's the very significant memorial bust in Holy Trinity Church, which not only is an early likeness of Shakespeare to give us a sense of what the man actually looked like, but it also mentions him as a great writer. On the inscription of the monument, see living art, but page to serve his wit. I'm paraphrasing there, but it mentions living art and looking at the page rather than the monument, which is an echo of, or prefigures possibly the commendatory verse of Ben Jonson, Shakespeare's friend and contemporary playwright, at the front of the first folio. The first folio is the first time Shakespeare's works are gathered together after his death by his friends. That's crucial.
What is equally crucial is that the 2 tributes mentioned by Dr. Edmondson did not come about until years after Shakespeare's death. Other great writers of the time, like poet Ben Jonson, were given more immediate recognition within months of their passing. Just as importantly, the great folio assembled by Shakespeare's friends 7 years after his death contains what many believe to be some important clues. 19th century author W.F.C. Wigston referred to William Shakespeare as Phantom Captain Shakespeare, the Rosicrucian Mask. This may have been partly due to the world-famous Droeshout portrait that appears on the front of the original Great Folio of 1623. Note the presence of a line extending from the jawline of Shakespeare to the bottom of his left ear, as if to suggest the face were simply a mask. If this seems far-fetched, consider the dedication which appears beside it, written by poet Ben Jonson, a friend of both Shakespeare and Sir Francis Bacon. With a rather mysterious twist, Jonson concludes with the words, "Reader, look not on his picture, but his book." Why would Ben Jonson point the reader away from the face of Shakespeare and compel men to look upon the book instead? A dedication that seems to parallel the monument at Holy Trinity Church.
On the inscription of the monument, see living art, but page to serve his wit. I'm paraphrasing there, but it mentions living art and looking at the page rather than the monument.
Are these allusions made by the men who knew the real William Shakespeare, that he was simply a mask or frontman for Francis Bacon?
Bacon paid him off to go and keep his mouth shut.
The monument at Holy Trinity Church refers to the page that serves Shakespeare's wit. But when one looks upon the page beneath his hand, it turns out to be blank. Some Baconians believe this is a secret code, alerting the reader that the Stratford man himself wrote nothing. The empty page is said to match the empty expression on the face of Shakespeare, who Baconians argue could barely write his name.
It's actually a big embarrassment to, you could say, the academic fraternity that believe the actor wrote the plays.
The question of Shakespeare's literacy is often mentioned because of the few known signatures he left behind. As one writer puts it, the scrawling, uncertain method of their execution stamps Shakespeare as unfamiliar with the use of a pen.
Perhaps a modern equivalent of this is to say, how good is your signature on your credit card? How good is your signature when you sign your name in a shop or on a bank transaction or whatever? There are several signatures which survive of Shakespeare. How good would you like them to be?
While Baconians argue that Shakespeare lacked experience, Edmondson points out that, as the son of a glove maker, he was uniquely qualified.
There's lots of references to different kinds of leather. For example, Feste's line in Act 3, Scene 1 of Twelfth Night about someone's wit being like a cheverel glove. Cheverel, as the son of a glove maker, Shakespeare would have known, is a kind of kid skin which stretches and stretches and stretches when you're making the gloves. It's a very soft, supple material to work with. And here you have it immersed in the wordplay of one of Shakespeare's clowns. Francis Bacon knew nothing about different kinds of leather, I would suggest. Actually, you could turn this whole thing on its head and say that Shakespeare wrote Bacon, which is something that a lot of people don't suggest, because why bother to do it that way around?
One of the problems is the Shakespearean trust is that while these objections come up to William Shakespeare being the author of the plays, they refuse to investigate the contrary evidence which has been put forward to them. They refuse to look into it. They refuse to look into the cipher codes that Bacon incorporated in the first folios, for instance.
Bacon uses this cipher in the Shakespeare work and his own, and in the work under his own name. But he also, doing that, signs his name and the name of the Rosicrucian fraternity.
This code system of writing he used all his entire life.
The examination of the cipher codes in Shakespeare's plays have filled hundreds of books and essays over the last few centuries. But perhaps the most specific evidence are the presence of Baconian and Rosicrucian emblems in the Great Folio of 1623 and in earlier works by Shakespeare. Bacon's light A and dark A symbol appears, representing the two Shakespeares, Apollo and Athena. Meanwhile, this Rosicrucian emblem, featuring the god Pan, is found prominently throughout the work. Other mystical headpieces with Rosicrucian symbolism are found both in the Shakespeare Folio of 1623 and in works openly published by Sir Francis Bacon. The varied symbols and ciphers clearly mark the presence of Bacon and his Rosicrucian fraternity, while to what extent they were involved in the writing of the plays remains a matter of debate. But perhaps the most compelling evidence is that the works of Shakespeare helped to accomplish exactly what Bacon and his Knights of the Helmet set out to achieve. While the numbers vary, the plays are said to have developed some 20,000 words for the English language, with some words being created, older words being revived, and current words being used in new ways. Could the actor from Stratford, with a limited education, have accomplished this coincidentally? The Shakespeare controversy was illustrated quite clearly by Masonic author Manly P. Hall in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, where he reveals the veiled purpose behind the writing of the plays. He says, Sir Francis Bacon, the Rosicrucian initiate, wrote into the Shakespearean plays the secret teachings of the fraternity of the Rose and Cross and the true rituals of the Masonic order. The Bacon-Shakespeare controversy involves the most profound aspects of science, religion, and ethics. He who solves its mystery may yet find therein the key to the supposedly lost wisdom of antiquity. The lost wisdom that Hall refers to is said to have begun in ancient Atlantis. Is this the real key to understanding Shakespeare? Incredibly, it may be said that the plays themselves represent the whole confusion of America's foundation. For while Shakespeare contains a clear representation of Christianity, with some 1,200 biblical references, along with them are plays with openly pagan and magical themes. Like the symbol of the Rose and Cross, the plays combine the teachings of Christianity.
Well, I hope your mind is as blown as mine when I first saw this documentary and discovered these things. But I just wanted to share with you some of the key takeaways that I got from this video, which was, number one, remember how we talked about themes of different leaders and stuff like that? You know, Sir Francis Bacon, you know, both believed in science and spirituality. So he was doing a very good job at combining both of those two things, right? And not just, you know, one versus the other. The second thing was he actually embodied this principle of humility, that he actually had a whole team of individuals, a whole school, his own printing press and stuff like that, to say, hey, listen, if we're going to create this new Atlantis, you know, we're going to create a new America, and we're going to do all these other things, we actually have to do a language. We have to actually teach people ideas and principles. You know, if you've read all the Shakespeare's plays, there's so many different important themes and wisdom that we all just take for granted today, where we have to love everybody, whether they're whatever religion they come from, whatever background. You know, Merchant of Venice, doth the Jew not have bleed? Doth the Jew not have ears? Doth the Jew not have eyes? You know, that whole theme. The whole entire life is a stage. You know, we're just merely actors playing on the stage, kind of like we're having this simulation. We're experiencing these experiences, to level up to the next level. You know, again, very fascinating, and all doing it with the humility of, I'm not going to take any credit for it. You know, this is my mission, that I'm going to do this. So I think it's, it's very, very powerful to do something and not take any credit for it. And, I'm in no way at the level of Bacon, but, it kind of reminds me, I'm on my own mission as well. I'm on my mission for helping to elevate the consciousness of humanity, to help develop more leaders with Electus Society, to give different perspectives, share my own perspective, my successes, my failures, so that you all as leaders can learn from these things, do your own research and find what's true for you. And also the last thing that I want to share with you about that video, which was so interesting to me, is the way in which conspiracy theories, that's a big theme. The best way to shut somebody down is to say that there's a conspiracy theory. But all throughout this, even experiences, did you know Sir Francis Bacon was banned by the Catholic Church as one of these individual authors, that you should not read any of their texts? Again, I just find it so fascinating that these same themes, that anytime you try to challenge the status quo, anytime you try to challenge those people who are trying to make a profit or benefit, they're going to come after you. So again, and how can you overcome that? Well, if you have, faith in something, whatever your religion or perspective, or, whether you're an atheist, believe in a higher self, believe in the acting on the best version of yourself, not to lie, these universal wisdoms and truths that we keep learning about, right? To, that you can, with your thoughts and feelings, you can overcome your fears and accomplish great things. So that's my advice and perspective to all of you. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation about raising consciousness, all about from the history, what's not taught in the textbooks. This was part 5 of the series. And so just to kind of recap, we went from unity consciousness, where we learned all about this, the importance of Akhenaten, his leadership lessons, to establishing mystery schools, my own spiritual journey, talking about I don't have to choose one religion or the other. I can just believe in the oneness of humanity, unity conscious, that we're all connected, we're all loving beings, we're all children of God. Or you know what, if you don't want to believe that, just believe that we're all creatures with the right to be human and to do good things and to do constructive things. I talked about the translations of different Jesus and different perspectives. We talked about going down the rabbit hole of biblical research and other different teachings that weren't in the Bible, as well as learning about all these secret societies and what they tried to hide and teach. And again, some of them got corrupted. Even Freemasonry got corrupted, where they would kill people if they talked about any of their teachings. And again, is the organization bad, or are there just people doing terrible things? So again, I hope you enjoyed it. So let me tell you about what's going to happen next. We're going to, in about 2 weeks, we've officially ended studying history, raising consciousness, what's not taught in the textbooks or history books. Now we're going to be moving on towards the future. Okay, so the next training in about 2 weeks is going to be about not raising consciousness. We're raising consciousness and the future, how to prepare for the future changes, what's going to be happening based on research and studying consciousness, and what kind of different changes are going to be happening to the climate, to our land. One of the most important aspects of leaders is the ability to anticipate what is going to happen into the future. That's what CEOs, they've done research and say that CEOs have better statistical accuracy at predicting what's going to happen in the future. So again, very, very fascinating stuff. I hope you enjoy it, of what changes are to come. At this point, I'll take any questions that, if you've watched this presentation, feel free to post it in the chat, or unmute yourself and feel free to ask any questions. If you don't, that's fine as well. And then just don't forget to fill out the post assessment. I really want to hear your feedback, whether you like this training, what you didn't like about it, what I can do to make it even better next time. And I really appreciate it. So I posted the link in the chat. So does anybody have any final questions? I'll give another 5 or 10 seconds. All right. No questions. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. I look forward to the next training. Stay tuned, and I'll send out this recording to the individuals who have access to it. And just to remind you, we now have over 400 members of Electus Society. I'm really excited about that. We're going to continue to grow. If you can help us, support us in growing, please consider doing a donation. The level 3 trainings are only available to those members who completed the prerequisites and have completed or completed level 1 and 2. So that means that there's, out of the 400 members, there are only about 80 people who are eligible to watch these trainings. And the reason why we did that is because there's a lot of sensitive. We're talking about religion, we're talking about science, we're talking about different perspectives. And so you have to have a different level of maturity and have gone through all the different trainings in order for us to understand how we got to this point, so that you understand my intentions, and which are to understand unity conscious, to understand, developing as leaders, and so that you can go out in the world and make a positive difference, not only in your own life, but those of other people as well. So thank you so much. I look forward to reading all your feedback, anything that you post in the survey or the post assessment. I do read, and I do value all your feedback and suggestions, as well as I love reading your comments. So have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching this video clip about conscious leadership. If you are committed to helping to create more conscious leaders in this world, that is, leaders with more humility, more integrity, more awareness, that take constructive action, then consider helping us by making a donation. Our goal is to have 600 conscious leaders develop before the end of this year. Currently, as of December 1st, we already have 400 members. And again, with your help, we can grow even further. How can you help us? Simply make a donation. If you visit buymeacoffee.com/Electus Society, you can either choose to give a monthly donation and join, and you get different access to a lot of these different membership benefits, or simply make a one-time donation. Click on the heart support button, choose 1, 3, 5, or type in any amount of coffees. Hit the support button, and you can upload your card information on the secure platform. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and let's continue our mission of building more leaders. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.